Hey folks, Tim Newman once again with Soft Light Studios, coming to you from a rather dreary Columbus, Ohio. It's been a long, rainy weekend, but you know what? I've used that to my advantage, both staying indoors and practicing my social distancing and working on Photoshop topics and videos to bring you guys. And you know, one of the things that occurred to me today as I was kind of looking through what tutorials would I bring you next was, does anybody have any idea what to use the single row or single column marquee tools for in Photoshop? Yeah, I use them once in a while, but I thought, you know what, a couple videos would be really helpful on these two kind of rarely used obscure tools. And in one of the videos that I started to put together today, I came across this idea of creating this really neat graphic, and I thought, well, this isn't going to help photo editors. And then I thought, wait, what am I thinking about? We're going to be making single row marquee selections. We're going to be filling them in. We're going to be duplicating them. We're going to be merging them. We're going to be free transforming them and rotating them and merging them again. And ultimately, we're going to be using a filter in Photoshop known as a Distort Twirl. Then we're going to be using the paint bucket tool and the gradient tool, and we're going to be messing with backgrounds. How could this do anything but help you become a better Photoshop editor? I think you're going to have a lot of fun with this one, if nothing else than to take your mind off of anything else that's going on around you. Check this out. To get started on this exercise, let's go ahead and create ourselves a new document. So I'm going to come up here in Photoshop using the File New command, which is a Command N on the Mac, a Control N on Windows. And I want to do this by pixels. Now I know at 300 pixels per inch, an 1800 pixel document is about 6 inches. And I want the same thing here. I want 6 inches this way. So we're looking to create about a 6 inch by 6 inch document. And what I want to do is I want to center what I'm going to do here. And it's going to be a single column marquee that I want centered up there. In other words, 1 pixel wide. So I'm actually going to go 1801 pixels by 1801 pixels. That will give me 1 column of pixels that's perfectly centered in the middle of this document. Again, 300 pixels per inch is what I want here. RGB color is fine. 16-bit is typical for me. I am going to go ahead and have a transparent background layer here as I typically do, but this is going to come in really handy as we work our way through this document, and it's going to show us some various background layering techniques that we can use. And then of course, ProPhoto RGB as our typical color space that I work in. So there you go. There is our blank document. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and double click on the name on layer strip for layer 1. And I'm going to call this transparent background. So we're kind of setting that aside and saving it. Of course, it requires that we spell it correctly because otherwise it'll drive me crazy. And I am going to create a new blank layer here called layer 1. Now, what I want to do is make sure that I have a vertical and horizontal set of guides here. And in order to do that, I'm going to come up here to View, New Guide Layout. You can see from one of our previous tutorials, we got some pretty funky guides in here. But for now, I'm just going to go with 2 columns. And come over here, we're going to go with 2 rows. And we'll leave the margins where they're at. I'm fine with that. And we want to make sure that we've got clear existing guides turned on so we don't end up with any things left over from other guide settings we have there. So we're going to click on OK. So now we know exactly where the center of our document is, both horizontally and vertically. Now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to grab the Single Column Marquee Tool. And I'm just going to click anywhere up here on this guide. And it can be outside of the document. Doesn't matter, because what the Single Column Marquee Tool is going to do is it's going to draw us that marquee, and it's going to use the document edges as the boundaries for the marquee. And what we want to do is we want to zoom in here quite a ways, right? And we want to see our marquee and where it's at. Now, hopefully it's centered up and it's snapped to the guide. If it didn't center up and snap to the guide for you, use your right and left arrow keys to get that guide mark centered up exactly in the marquee selection. Now, I know this is a little bit hard to interpret at the moment. You're looking at the transparency grid back here going, well, it doesn't look like a single column marquee, but it is. That is exactly 1 pixel wide, the entire height of the document from top to bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. I'm going to use the paint bucket tool to fill it in. I'm going to hit the D key to load up my default color set. And you can see we have black as our foreground color, white is our background color. That's fine. We're going to click anywhere inside of here. Boom. We have a single pixel wide column now from top to bottom in this document. I don't need the single column marquee anymore, so I'm going to do a Command D on the Mac. That's a Control D on Windows. I'm going to make that go away. And then I'm going to do a Command 0 on the Mac, Control 0 on Windows, and I'm going to make that fit the screen. Now, at the moment, it's hard to tell that we have a line on this document, that we actually even got that filled in. And we kind of got to take a little leap of faith here because the guides also are covering it up at the same time. That's okay. We'll be able to confirm that it's there in just a second. We're going to go through one more step before we do that. And then we'll take a look at it and make sure that with the guides off, we can see our lines that we created. With layer 1 still active, which it should be, I want you to do a Command J on the Mac. That's a Control J on Windows. And you just made a copy of that layer. And then what we're going to do before we do anything else is we're going to do a Command T on the Mac. That's a Control T on Windows. You'll notice that we get the transform control frame around the contents of our layer, in this case that single line. And up here in the tool option bar, you can see we have a lot of things for scaling it and sizing it and moving it. One of the things that we have that's most important up here is the rotate angle box right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this line and we're going to turn it 90 degrees. And I think you saw it spin through there real quickly, at least I hope you did. So we've got that. We're going to hit enter to commit that 90 degrees, and then we're going to hit enter or the return key, whichever one you call it, again, and that will totally commit that change. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and hit the Command E key on the Mac. That's the Control E key on Windows, and you're going to see our layer 1 copy is going to merge into our initial layer 1 that we created. Now at this point, like I said, we're going to look for a little confirmation that in fact our lines are there. So we're going to do two things. One is we're going to do a Command semicolon on the Mac, Control semicolon on Windows, turn off our guides. You can kind of see our lines there, not very clearly. Then we're going to make the transparent background layer our active layer. We're going to come down here and click on the plus symbol at the bottom of the layers control panel, which is the create a new layer icon. We're going to go ahead and double click on the layer 2 name in the layer strip, and we're going to call this white background. And you guessed it, grab the paint bucket tool with the G key, make sure you have the correct one. Switch your foreground and background colors with the X key, that makes white our foreground color, and click to fill that in with white. Look, now our single pixel column and single pixel row is real clear cut and easy to see. Let's make sure that we make layer 1 active one more time. I would like to duplicate this again. So again, on the Mac, that's a Command J. On Windows, that's a Control J. You see we now have a layer 1 copy again. One more time, we're going to do the Command T key on the Mac. That's the Control T key on Windows. That puts us back into free transform mode. We're going to come up here to the option bar again, and we're going to go here to the rotation option. And this time we're not going to take it 90 degrees because that would just rotate it and put it right on top of the other one. We're going to take it halfway around, and that's 45 degrees. So we're going to put 45 degrees in there. You can see where we're at with that. It's exactly halfway rotated between the horizontal line and the vertical line. Dividing that in half, we're going to hit the return or enter key to commit that 45 degrees. We're going to hit the return or enter key again to commit the change. So there, we now have what looks to be 8 lines in our document, easily created out of the one line we started off with. One more time, we're going to do a Command E on the Mac, a Control E on Windows. That flattens that back down to one layer. And one more and last time, we're going to duplicate that layer. So again, a Command J on the Mac, that's a Control J on Windows. And we're going to do that Command T on the Mac or Control T on Windows to put us into free transform mode. And we want to rotate this new layer. Now this time we have to go half of that half that we just did. So originally it was 90 degrees, and then half of that was 45 degrees, and half of 45 degrees is 22.5 degrees. So let's go ahead and type that 22.5 in there. You can see that really divides things up nicely. Again, the return or enter key to commit the numeric entry into the rotate field, and the return or enter key again to commit the free transform change. And then for the last time, we are going to flatten this layer with the layer below it, just like we have a couple of times previous to this, and that is the Command E key on the Mac, the Control E key on Windows. So there we have it. We have the basis for this graphic that we're putting together. We have kind of one half of it, and it wasn't that difficult to do. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to run a filter on this, and we find that up here in the filter menu. We come down here to the Distort group, and in the Distort group you see a filter called Twirl. And you can see what Twirl is going to do. It's going to, twist from the center outward this layer that it's currently on. I would like to do this at 100 degrees, and I think that gives us a pretty nice twist in there in the center. You can kind of see the center of the twist, and then you over here in this box see the overall look that you're going to come up with. Let's go ahead and click on OK, and there we have it. A pretty nice twirl in that pattern that we got there. Makes it look a little more organic and a little less man-made and structured, which I think is pretty cool. Guess what? I lied. We're going to duplicate one more time. So with this twirled layer that we have here, let's do that Command D on the Mac. I'm sorry, stop, don't do that. I was wrong. That would be a Command J on the Mac, a Control J on Windows, and that gives us another copy of layer 1 called layer 1 copy. And now if we go into the free transform tool with the Command T on the Mac or the Control T on Windows, what we want to do is within a pop-up menu here in the layer itself. So we're going to right click here, and you can see down here at the bottom we have some choices for flipping. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to flip vertical, and immediately you get this really cool graphic pattern out of it, because when you flip it vertically, they line up with one another. And the reason they line up with one another is because we started with our Single Column Marquee Tool exactly in the center. So we know from the standpoint of being uniform, top to bottom, left to right, everything's going to stay lined up. All right, let's go ahead and merge this down. And that, again, is going to be a Command D on the Mac, a Control E on Windows. And oops, I forgot to commit my change. There we go. Hit the return or enter key. And then we're going to do that Command D on the Mac, Control E on Windows. And we're now back down to one layer with that entire line art graphic in that single layer. At this point, I think it'd be appropriate to come in here and double click on the name for layer 1, and let's call it Flower Outline. I kind of like that. All right, there we go. We got our graphic put together, and I think you can see, starting with the Single Column Marquee and running through all of those copies and free transforms and rotates, and then ultimately that twirl and that vertical flip gave us a pretty cool pattern with a minimal amount of effort. So now that we have our flower outline done, what I would like to do is add some color to this graphic. So what we're going to do is, in a radiating pattern, we're going to put basically a shifting set of colors working from the inside to the outside in this. And what I'd like to do is put it on its own layer. So I'm going to come down here to the layer control panel, click on the create a new layer icon right here. I have another new layer 1 created here. I'm going to double click on the name here in the layer strip, and I'm going to call this Flower Fill. So we're going to put all of our colors on this Flower Fill layer. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab the magic wand tool, and what we would normally see happening here by default, if we just grab the tool without making any changes up here in the toolbar, we might get an outline like this. Even if we came in here and tried to select one of these spaces in the interior, and that's because there's really nothing on this layer. This layer is in fact transparent. So what we need to do is sample through all the layers, right? So now it's looking at the flower outline below it. But if we click on that, you can see we get a rather unwieldy selection. So let's get rid of that selection again. Command D on the Mac, Control D on Windows to get rid of it. And let's turn on contiguous. And then you'll notice as soon as we turn on contiguous, now we're getting selections that are better constrained. So if you're getting ready to follow along using the Magic Wand tool, I would stick with these settings here, and we should be okay. So I'm going to do a Command D, Control D to get rid of that one selection that I just made, and then we're going to zoom in and we're going to see where we're going to get started here. Might have zoomed just a tad too far. I'm going to skip this little ring of shapes in the center. I'm going to start right out here. And you can see where I've started right here, what I would consider to kind of be the second ring out. I've made my first selection. Now I'm simply going to hold down the Shift key and go around this and select all of these, I guess I would call them petals, in a radial pattern here in that second ring out. Then I'm going to grab the paint bucket tool with the G key. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pick a really nice, bright yellow as my starting point, and I'm going to go ahead and fill in there. If you don't fill in all the way around, take a look at the paint bucket tool here and make sure that contiguous is turned on so it goes in and fills in your entire set of selections there. So now with the Magic Wand tool, W key, I'm going to go another layer out, grab my first shape. I'm holding that Shift key to turn on the Add Selection modifier to the Magic Wand tool, and I'm working my way around what I would consider to be the third ring of petals here, and you can see I now have them all selected. G for the paint bucket tool. Let's bring up our foreground color picker again and maybe go a little darker yellow here so we can see the gradations as we're working outwards. Now I'm going to go to the third level. Again, W for the Magic Wand tool. Grab my first petal, and then I'm going to hold down the Shift key and start adding into selections. I'm going to start fast forwarding through some of this in the video here, so you don't have to watch this with every ring. I'll finish this ring, and then on subsequent rings I'll just do the first and last shape and fast forward through the stuff in the middle. So there, all of those are selected. Going to do the G key for the paint bucket tool. Let's bring up the color picker, get ourselves another little bit darker color, and I think you can see it's starting to take shape here. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and go ahead and pick my first shape here. I'll be back with you in a second after. Okay, got the last shape selected there. Going to hit the G key for the paint bucket tool again. Let's go a little darker here, a little darker orange. There we go. Again, another ring out, W key to get started. First shape. Catch up with you at the end of this loop. Okay, got those all selected. Paint bucket tool, color picker one more time. Maybe that darker orange. Let's go another ring out, back to the Magic Wand tool. See you in a second. Okay, got all those selected. G key for the paint bucket tool. Back to the foreground color picker. Let's get in here to that darker orange. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can see the rest of my piece here. Back to the Magic Wand tool. First selection. See you in a bit. Okay, we have all those selected. Let's get the paint bucket tool. This time, rather than picking a different color here, I'm going to knock down the brilliance or illumination on this one. There's my outer color there. One last layer to go. Paint bucket tool or wand tool one more time with the W key. There's first selection. There's our last selection. Let's hit the G key for the paint bucket tool. Color picker one last time, and I'd really like to come over here and get myself into a really nice kind of burnt orange for that outside color. So there you go. That's filled in. I'm going to do a Command D on the Mac, Control D on Windows to unselect that, and then a Command 0 on the Mac, Control 0 on Windows to zoom out. So there you go. We have our shape all filled in. I think that's really cool. The one thing that sticks out of my mind as the last step here is I'm really kind of seeing through the center here. Remember, we didn't do any coloring there. And if you think about it, other than this white background, there's a bunch of transparency here. So imagine that we made the white background layer active. We came down here to the bottom of the layers control panel and clicked on create a new layer. And you can see we now have a new layer right on top of the white background layer. Let's double click on that. Call it the black background. And let's grab the paint bucket tool. You can see that we have that burnt orange as our foreground color, black as our background color. Let's switch those colors with one another with the X key. Paint bucket tool with the G key, make sure we have the right one, and let's fill that in with black. So there you have it. It's pretty much ready to go, and that black background really fills in the center quite nicely without any problems. So that's it. There is our graphic flower, if you will, and that was all built with one line created by the Single Column Marquee Tool. And then it was all copying and manipulating layers, free transforming them, rotating them, merging them, and that twirl that gave us that overlapping pattern that we then used the Magic Wand tool to select all those rings and fill it in with that color. So I think the single column marquee part of this was really simple. All the extra steps that were added onto it were really cool, and they really showed off a lot of the power of Photoshop and a lot of those tools in advanced ways. So I hope you had a lot of fun with that and you walked away learning a bunch of stuff. That's it for this video. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're staying home, staying safe, staying healthy. Remember, as we always say, learning equals skills, practice equals mastery. We'll see you out there soon. Have a good night.